it's always good to be clear about the expectations of how you will engage with your peers, but also the instructor too, will give prompt feedback and feedback that, makes the student know that their contribution is valued, right? And that they're not just posting things, and so that's one way of keeping them engaged by letting them know that their contribution is valued.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and second language acquisition. This week on Speaking of Language,
David Ortega, Language Technology Specialist in the Center for Language Study at Yale University, discusses strategies for engaging learners remotely.
Welcome to a new episode of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelica Kramer, the Director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University.
And I'm Sam Lupowitz, the LRC's Media Manager. Our special focus on language teaching and learning strategies in a remote environment continues today with our colleague David Ortega.
David is the technology specialist in the Center for Language Study at Yale University. We will talk about strategies for engaging learners remotely. Welcome to Speaking of Language, David.
Hi, Angelica. How are you? Hi, Sam. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, we appreciate you taking the time. We know that this is a very busy time for everybody. So before we dive into this topic of how we can engage our learners in this new environment, can you talk a little bit about your background? What is it that you do? What's your path with languages?
Sure. I started off as a PhD candidate in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, and so I have I've studied literature, and I'm also just, a language geek. So I've been, taking as many languages as possible. So some of them because of language requirements that our program had, and then others with personal, interest or, things that were related to family or things that I was reading. So I took several languages and when I started teaching, I became really interested in the way that I was teaching, and also just interested in improving, finding ways of improving, what I was transmitting to students.
Yeah.
And finding ways of getting students to be engaged. And, I was very, very much, trying to make my classroom an environment that was student-centered. And so I became more and more involved with the CLS, and so I started participating in a lot of the activities that they had, and they have a wonderful certificate program, so the SLA certificate program.
Yeah.
And I went ahead and I fulfilled the requirements, and I found wonderful colleagues there, not just graduate students, but also faculty that that met at the CLS, and so I started learning more and more, and I knew that I wanted to do more with language pedagogy, and so and then I found mentors there too. So then I kind of got more interested and more into it, and I'm continuing to learn. So
we all are.
that I continue to learn. And right now what I do at the center is, as you mentioned, the title is Language Technology Specialist. And the job itself has a number of different components. So on the one side, there's the more of the tech support part of it. So I support a lot of the SEI classes with technology issues on a daily basis, but also kind of look at, with my colleagues, of course, look at the bigger picture items. So I am in constant communication with the program manager, Chris Kaiser at Cornell, at Columbia, excuse me. And then, Sam and I also text, once in a while when there are problems too. So we talk about the daily, but also the bigger picture items. And then the other part of my job is to engage with the faculty. So to work with them to think about projects that they have in mind that involve technology. And so, I'm always happy to meet with them and to be a part of their project. And they're always so welcoming. And, again, there's a lot that I'm learning from their efforts to make the classroom student-centered environment. So I'm very happy. I feel fortunate to be there. And then most recently we had our, and I'm sure you did too at Cornell, the 2 intensive weeks of online teaching bootcamp essentially. So
Yeah.
that was quite an experience because I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but this is my first year working there. So I got quite an experience, a unique experience, given the circumstances and and yeah, so just involved in a variety of different programs, and my job kind of has different aspects. So.
Yeah, so you mentioned your interest in student-centered environments and your teaching, that you've always really focused on that aspect. So can you talk a little bit about what you have been doing and the recommendations that you've been giving your faculty at Yale on what can you do now that you're in this remote environment? What do you do to still focus on the student and to engage the student in this slightly different environment?
Yeah, I think that language instructors, language faculty, we are actually in a quite a one step ahead of the game, I believe, in many ways, because our classrooms
Yes.
already tend to be very dynamic, very student centered, and we because we care about the quality of the lesson, right? We care about making sure that students are engaged. We're always considering different learning styles. We're considering different needs. We're going the extra mile, I think, and I've seen this in the faculty that I work with, that they go the extra mile to provide a variety of activities to always learn new tools, and not just to know how to use the tools, but also how to use them effectively, because teaching a language is really quite different from teaching anything else. So I feel that
Yes.
they're always seeking advice, they're always learning new tools, and striving to make a difference by, again, having a variety of different activities. And now in this new environment, I think that it provides a good opportunity to use those tools even more, but also to mix it up, shake things up with synchronous and asynchronous activities, so that the students who have an opportunity to collaborate outside of the virtual classroom, so they continue with the learning, like even beyond the set time for class. And so that's one way. And then another way is to have design activities that encourage students to be more autonomous in their learning in some ways. So keeping with that principle of having the instructor be more of a facilitator, more of a collaborator, and then having them really go out and discover things on their own. I think it's a wonderful way. Of course, with that, I think there are always ways in which we can provide guidelines
Sure.
and guidance, and really teach them, also how to, maybe not teach them, but also try to show them how to learn in this new environment, because it's new not only for the instructors but also for the students. And one concrete example that I saw of somebody going the extra mile to teach their student was a French instructor, Candace Group, actually from the French department, created a whole PowerPoint on on how to help the student to get used to this new way of learning. So not just how to set up Zoom on their computer and how to log into class every day, but also practical tips on how to try to have a home setup, to try to be comfortable, to try to seek other opportunities to complement what they're doing in the lesson. So this instructor had provided this amazing resource to colleagues, so that students are also aware that they have a responsibility to continue to learn right on their own. And so I think that that's one important thing that we continue to foster a sense of community, making it about the student, making it about learner autonomy. But also include a variety of activities. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think this is so important what you just mentioned, that we really need to support the students, set specific expectations for them, be so clear with what the goal is of the lesson, even more so than what we would have done in the traditional face-to-face environment.
Yeah.
And I think we can't take for granted that our students will just pick up the new etiquette or just how to move in this new space. So really taking the time to stepping back and explaining to our students, how does this feature function? How are we using the learning management system maybe slightly differently from what we've done before? So I think that's wonderful that your faculty have taken this extra time to focus on the students before they even dive back into teaching, and then focus on engaging the students in this new environment with the content and with each other.
With with expectations and guidelines, I think that tangentially relates to the question of communication. And so,
Hmm.
I mean, it's even more important than ever, to
Yeah.
maintain those channels of communication open and to even strengthen them with, you could have messages sent out in different ways. So you could have announcements on Canvas, on a technical level. You could have emails to make sure that everyone gets messages, and then also, try to. I mean, I think that be there for office hours. I mean, I know that language faculty already work so hard and they already offer office hours constantly. But I think that just being there for students, I think it can make a huge difference. And so one slight complication too that instructors, have already talked about. They're already raising the concern about different time zones because everyone is distributed like
Sure. Yeah.
throughout different geographical locations. So that's another thing that is uh, uh, difficult to deal with. But I think that also makes us think about the kind of accommodations that we have to make. But just in another way, just thinking about fairness and what is fair and for all students, because we want to maintain that within maintaining a sense of continuity. I think that we also need to maintain that same sense of fairness and providing the same level of opportunities for learning as we had in the face-to-face classroom. So.
Well, and I think this is also, you mentioned, the differences between or synchronous and asynchronous ways to connect with students. And I think thinking about what really could be done in an asynchronous manner, and what are the affordances of connecting with the students synchronously. So I think rethinking some of our pedagogical approaches for this, this is the time now.
Yeah, and I mean, so keep things to keep in mind, and we already sort of do this in the face-to-face classroom. But if for instance, if you're encouraging students to post things on Canvas as part of a discussion forum, right? I think that it's always good to be clear about the expectations of how you will engage with your peers, but also the instructor too, will give prompt feedback and feedback that makes the student know that their contribution is valued, right? And that they're not just posting things, and so that's one way of keeping them engaged by letting them know that their contribution is valued, and by giving them feedback. And so, I mean, that's one asynchronous tool. I mean, if we talk about, there are a dozen other tools that we can use, right? So VoiceThread is one of them too, which is a wonderful resource that allows the instructor the student to really practice with all four language skills. There are ways of making interactive videos so that students are also get a chance to supplement what they do, and again, I think that this also comes down to the level of rethinking, and I think the language instructors do this well, thinking about the kind of items that are perhaps better suited for an asynchronous experience, right?
Yeah.
So maybe like you make an interactive video, and let's say that usually maybe in the classroom you have students react to a video and you give them some questions, right? And that's what they do for maybe 10 minutes of a class. Perhaps we can do that as homework, and they can kind of react to those videos, and perhaps to engage in an interactive video experience outside of class, and then come back to class to discuss the video in a different way, right? So kind of in some ways also thinking about multi-literacies approach. So looking at one source, one piece, one authentic resource in different ways, right? So engaging with different aspects, different layers of that material.
Do you have any stories about specific successes that faculty have shared of tasks and assignments that have engaged their students online, or maybe help maintain engagement with materials and their peers offline?
One of the things that has been, I guess, that has brought joy to me, given the training that we have had, is the fact that faculty have commented on how they have used the breakout room function, which I think was one of the most challenging things during the training. And I have been, happily surprised with the comments about how they have used it in the classroom to foster, that level of intimacy that we have when we pair students up to do pair work or to do group work. And I think that has been one of the beautiful things that they have been able to do, that they were very concerned about, because they at first they didn't know whether or not that was an option, right? And so once we went through the motions on how to use it, I think that we have brainstormed together on ways in which you can make it even to go even beyond the notion of pairing people up. So one of the things that we've talked about that I think that people have done successfully is taking the extra time to strategize when you're using that function, right? When you're using that tool. So, in the language classroom, we're always thinking about pairing students up with peers with whom they might be, they might be comfortable working with, but also people that might also, so that they could learn from each other. So, in other words, perhaps pairing someone who might be stronger in one ability with someone who might be weaker in that same ability, so that they help each other out. And then, so that's one thing. Strategizing is one of the things that we have talked about successfully that they have accomplished. And then another thing is, on a very technical level, just sort of utilizing some of the basic functions like renaming the rooms, the breakout rooms, so that there's, that sense of continuity, and so that they use it in several ways. They can add, to the class, like maybe labeling the rooms for a certain topic that students are discussing in different groups, or to foster a sense of team, of teamwork. So that adds to the experience. So that's one thing that they have talked about that they have done successfully this week. And again, it's only the first week, and I think that's, to me, that's huge, because I think it's one of the most challenging functions, and it's also one of the most relevant too, for the class as it's happening, live in a synchronous way. They've also shared other ways in which they have had their students collaborate using Google Docs, or using the whiteboard function, right? Sharing the whiteboards that students annotate. So that's one other piece that they have done. I had a class, because I teach a class, and my class is only 8 weeks, so it just ended. But it was interesting for me to. I think the class was successful, but we had presentations, and usually for these presentations, they do skits, and they usually have props, right, that they use, like costumes, wigs, or whatnot. And these are medical professionals. These are medical professionals, and so for me, I didn't have quite the time to reimagine the assignment, and so it took a little bit of time for me to get used to seeing my students holding their stethoscope up to the camera, right, instead of actually putting it on someone's chest, or kind of mimicking everything So it took some time for me to adjust to that, but I think that the students did a wonderful job at just, imagining ways, they could replicate what they would do in the face-to-face classroom in the physical space.
Yeah, I guess it forces us to become a little bit more creative too for projects or tasks like that. So we just started teaching on Monday. So we are still, we're a little bit behind you guys with our experience of actually experiencing this new environment here. What would your number one suggestion be to make sure that our students are actually comfortable in this new space? What can we tell our students? How can they still get better adjusted to this new remote environment?
I think that again, I think it's a question about making sure that students know that we understand the circumstances, but that the language classroom really is more than, at least to me, it's really more than just a class. I think that because of the frequency with which we see our students and the number of skills that we work on with them, and the different aspects that are involved, with language learning. So beyond the development of language, but also the development of really an identity and a sense of community. I think that it is important to remind students that the language classroom is a community of learners, and that to encourage them to see it in that way, to see it as something that is beyond just a class. And I think that maybe it can be, perhaps it might be difficult because of students have some students might have different priorities, but I think that ideally, I would say that remind students that it's more about just a class. It's about a community. It's about developing a sense of identity, learning about another culture, discovering really yourself as a learner too. So.
And ultimately about communication, right?
About communication, of course, communication, and that's essentially, it's highly relevant right now because we are asked to be isolated, and so the language classroom really provides an opportunity for us to communicate, to keep in touch, and if learning a language, keeping up with those abilities can help us reach more people later now, but also later down the road. So.
Oh, great. Thank you, David. We appreciate all your time and your thoughts. But before we sign off, we would like you to share with us your favorite word in a language you speak or have learned or learning or want to learn. So love to hear it.
This is the most difficult question, but
I'm glad, I guess.
So when I was in college, I took Japanese for a year, and I actually got an opportunity to travel to Japan. And so my favorite word is actually really two words with a hyphen, and it's a concept. It's wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi. And so wabi-sabi is more of a world view. And so this worldview is a worldview that encourages us to see beauty in imperfection, to see, really the fact that, everything is impermanent, and to see that as something that is beautiful. So it's more of an aesthetic in some ways. And it, those sort of like the sense of longing resonates with me on a personal level, kind of longing, accepting that imperfection and accepting what, that certain roughness. So while it resonates with me, I also kind of struggled to fully understand it. So I always have to wrestle with this concept of, of transience, of imperfection, of finding beauty in what is really incomplete maybe in some ways, and so that and then so that's one sort of on the conceptual level. But the word, I mean, two words really, wabi sabi, to me it has, you know, the symmetry, the rhyme that is inside of it, and also just the number of syllables. I think maybe in some ways it also helps that Japanese is syllabic, and so my native language is Spanish, and so it's also syllabic with, you know, consonant vowel, and so Japanese also has that consonant vowel that is, you know, pretty much, you know, I would say a big portion of words have that kind of syllable. So.
Yeah, a beautiful word and a beautiful concept indeed.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well,
great.
Thanks so much for speaking of language with us today, David.
No problem. It was my pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right. Well, next week, we will continue our special focus on language teaching and learning strategies in a virtual space. Until then,
Auf Wiederhören.
The Language Resource Center is located on the ground floor of Stimson Hall on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. Check us out on the web at lrc.cornell.edu or look for Cornell LRC on Facebook and Twitter.
Speaking of Language is produced by Angelica Kramer and Sam Lupowitz.
Recorded by Sam Lupowitz.
Original music by Sam Lupowitz, Dan Gable, and Joe Gibson.
Thanks also to the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University.
As a reminder, the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Sciences or any other official entity of Cornell University.
We thank our listeners, and do stay tuned for our next episode.